Welcome back. Tens of thousands of people are gathering in the streets of Manhattan, New York City. It's being called the biggest march ever to raise awareness about the dangers of climate change. And it's not just in New York. Hundreds of marches and demonstrations are going on around the world. They are timed to coincide with the meeting of the United Nations General Assembly. Climate change action is on the agenda. Shyla Rahgav manages the climate change policy for Conservation International. Welcome. I've got to ask, what are the points demonstrators want to make today?
Well, Julian, climate change truly is a global problem. Every country, every community has its part to play. The science tells us that we need to be reducing our emissions 40 to 70% below 2010 levels by 2050. And it really is an issue of global urgency that demands robust policies, demands robust commitments from governments to meet that need of what the science is suggesting.
But Shyla, here's what some people would say to argue against that. You know, we talked about this, and of course, we've heard from politicians that have come out for changing how we deal with emissions from fossil fuels and the like, talking about the polar ice caps melting. But now what we see scientifically is that I think it's the polar ice cap. I think it's in Antarctica or on the North Pole. I'm not sure exactly which one, is actually increasing now. So for those people who would say, hey, look, we really don't have a problem, how would you counter that?
I don't think there's any uncertainty on the science. I think the scientific community has reached consensus that climate change is real, that it's a significant challenge of our time, and that it is causing impacts that are palpable, noticeable, and are already having an impact on the world.
Okay, here's a question then. Of course, the UN's going to deal with this, and rightfully so. But there's been so much talk about the ineffectiveness of the United Nations. What can they really do? What do you expect them to accomplish to make a change here in this situation?
Right. So I think climate change is such a fundamental challenge that it really needs to intersect and transect all levels of jurisdiction and governance. The solutions need to come from the grassroots level. They need to come from communities, from cities, but they also need to come from different scales and levels, including the global system and mechanism that really is important for setting the political trends, for directing resources, and for ensuring that we reach the collective action necessary to reduce our emissions and also deliver the resources required.
Okay, two key words there, collective action. Who is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, or if is there more than one? Is it corporations on the hand, or is it developing countries that are probably emitting more fossil fuels and emissions that don't have the kind of tight regulations that other industrialized countries have?
I think the fundamental issue here is historic responsibility. The climate change that we're experiencing today is a result of emissions through which developed countries have reached their current position. Many developing countries are now in the position of catching up and of securing those resources to meet those standards of human well-being and development. So it really is a difficult and complex dynamic. I think it requires a lot of trust building. It requires innovative and practical solutions. But I think fundamentally, we need to realize that action on climate change need not come at the expense of economic development. We have the solutions, we have the tools and resources.
Okay, let's talk brass tacks here, getting down to the nitty-gritty. What are we facing as a world community if emissions go unchecked? What are we looking at?
So what we are looking at is trying to limit warming to 2 degrees Celsius, and that really is a scientific consensus that if we go beyond 2 degrees and current emissions trajectories and trends put us on a course to 4 degrees Celsius, which really would result in catastrophic climate change. We would have large-scale loss of ecosystems, sea level rise, increased intensity of storms. It really would be a different world that we would be living in.
I want to go to South Beach once again. Let's go to school here for a minute. You're the teacher, and I want you to give those grades to people, organizations, countries that are doing the right thing. Who would you give an A to in terms of making sure that we have good climate in the near future or in the far future?
Yeah.
Who gets an A?
Despite the challenges, I think there's a lot of, I'm very optimistic. Our work, Conservation International, we've partnered with a lot of really great corporations, for example.
Okay.
We have a partnership with Starbucks for the last 15 years through which we've worked on ethical sourcing guidelines, but also on projects and programs to help the community communities in which they work so that they can secure their livelihoods, but also regulate the climate. So I think there's some companies out there that are doing great things. There's countries, there's cities, and there's subnational entities that are doing some really great work to reduce deforestation and to use...
Can you name some names?
In terms of
outside of Starbucks? Who's doing some good
Walmart
stuff?
is also doing some really great work.
Really?
We're working with them on sustainable, ethical sourcing and supply chains, looking at palm oil, beef, seafood. So there's some really great players, and I think there's tremendous potential. We have the tools, we just have to deploy them.
All right, we have less than 30 seconds here. I would assume, according to you, Shyla, the future is bright. There is hope.
Absolutely, there's always hope, and seeing the tens of thousands of people gathering here and around the world is really inspirational, and I hope it's a firm call to action to our global leaders to really meet those demands and really put forth bold commitments from the government level, corporation level, and also civil society.
Well, Rise News is on the case. We'll be monitoring these demonstrations and marches all throughout the day, and I want to thank you for joining us and giving us some insight.
My pleasure.
All righty.